Good afternoon, everyone. Before we start our webinar this afternoon, just a few important announcements and reminders. Maybe remind everyone to always put their microphones on mute unless you are going to speak. We also recommend that you put your uh, Zoom on speaker view so that you can see the speaker at all times. For those who have questions later, we will be calling you based on your entry in the chat box. So if you have questions, please type in your questions in the chat box and include as well your name and your club and indicate whether you want the host or the facilitators to read or you would like to ask the questions yourselves. Okay? So again, I'd like to remind everyone to put their speakers on mute. So to start our webinar for this afternoon, let me call our district governor, Governor Anthony Tony P. Parugao, to call this meeting webinar to order.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Yes, by virtue of the duties and responsibilities entrusted to me by Rotary International, and in my capacity as District Governor of RI District 3800, this district webinar on anti-human trafficking is hereby called to order.
Thank you very much, Governor Tony P. And now, to lead us in the invocation, I would like to call President nominee of the Rotary Club of Pasig, Bong Paloma. Rotarian Bong.
You're on mute.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, as the day comes to a close, thank you for all the blessings we received today. May you bless us tonight and gather for a moment of sharing and learning. This we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. The Father, and the Son, and the Spirit. Amen. And now, for the national anthem, let us sing, all together sing our national anthem with fervor.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Hayang magiliw, sa sigahanan, alam ng puso, sa titik ko'y buhay. Lupang inilang, tuyakan ang magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagalang tutok sa simoy at sa langit ko babaw, ay hinanang tulang, awit sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ang matawad ko'y matumpay na naghihingin, makituwin at araw niya, kailan pa may iwatitigin, lumalang araw ng walang pagsingkaw, buhay namin sa piling ko, ang higaya ng barangay mga ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
So, pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Again, I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar on combating online sexual exploitation of children. This webinar is hosted by the Rotary Club of Pasig and is a project of the Committee on Peace and Conflict Prevention and Resolution, of which I am the chairperson. So that if I forgot to introduce myself, I am John Navier from the Rotary Club of Pasig, and I'm also the chairperson of the Peace and Conflict Prevention and Resolution, which is the Rotary theme for this month. So to give our welcome remarks for this afternoon, I would like to call our president, the president of the Rotary Club of Pasig, President RJ Ermita, to give the welcome remarks.
To our District Governor, Tony P. Parungao, to our PDGs present this afternoon, our District Governor-elect, District Governor nominee, and District Governor nominee designate, to all our district officers present, to the transforming presidents, the members of the Rotary, the Rotarians, and the spouses of District 3800, especially my classmates, of course, from Zone 6. Welcome. And the officers and members of the Rotary Club of Pasig who are here. To our guest speaker who will be properly introduced later on. And of course, to our friends, guests, and especially I see the presence of our DepEd officials with us this afternoon. Welcome and good afternoon on behalf of the Rotary Club of Pasig. On our 120th year, which we celebrated in January 21, we are very proud and honored that the district has given us a chance to host this month's seminar, especially so that the chairman of the Peace and Conflict Resolution, Prevention and Resolution is a member of our club, past President John Javier, who has happily also volunteered to be the host of this afternoon. It's very apt that he's in charge of peace and conflict prevention and resolution. I'll explain to you why later on. Anyway, we should have a very interesting talk this afternoon and a very interesting speaker, especially that the topic is on countering the online sex exploitation of children. It is so much important now because more than ever, the exposure of our children to the virtual world has been enhanced. It used to be a pastime, especially when they're outside of school. But now, I would say majority of the time of all our children, our grandchildren are online. And with that, we look forward to an interesting talk and a more interesting question and answer portion later on. So thank you very much. And again, welcome in behalf of the Rotary Club of Pasig.
Thank you very much, Transforming President RJ Ermita. And now to give us...
Thank you.
Okay, thank you again, President RJ. And now let us hear from our governor, Governor Tony P. Parungao.
Thank you very much, past President John, and good afternoon to everybody. Transforming President RJ Ermita. Of course, our guest honor and speaker, DOJ Undersecretary Emmy Aglipay-Villar, who will be properly introduced in due course. I understand past district governors Lina Aurelio and Juna Villar have registered and they might be in here already. The members of the District Executive Committee who are present right now, District Co-Trainer June, past President Luz, past President Herman, and Charter President Bobby, among others. The members of the District Executive Committee and the District Leadership Team present today. The transforming presidents, my fellow Rotarians, especially the members of the Rotary Club of Pasig who are celebrating their 50th year this year. Guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Allow me to thank, first of all, Transforming President RJ and the Rotary Club of Pasig for agreeing to host this district webinar on anti-human trafficking entitled Combating Online Sex Exploitation of Children, or OSEC. I also wish to express my utmost appreciation to our District Peace and Conflict Prevention Chair, past President Peter John, for conceptualizing this district activity. The topic albeit disturbing and unpleasant, is timely and relevant. And we certainly would like to know how Rotary can play a role in this advocacy. I also wish to take advantage of this opportunity to thank USEC Emmy Aglipay-Villar for taking time off from her very busy schedule to be with us today. Having been a former government employee in a previous life, I, for one, appreciate her presence here to share her insights on the topic. That she is the head of no less than the country's Interagency Council Against Trafficking, or IACAT, speaks of her authority, her credibility, her knowledge, and her expertise on this matter. Being a law practitioner myself, I am personally most curious about the situation of OSEC during the pandemic. Has there been, for instance, an increase in the number of cases? What exactly is the DOJ stand on the requests for children to appear through video conferencing or electronic means in legal proceedings such as inquest and preliminary investigations? In addition, what are the child protective measures that our DOJ prosecutors are employing for OSEC survivors to make sure they are protected during legal proceedings? And most important of all, how can the private sector, and that includes Rotary, help in combating OSEC? We look forward to hearing the answers to these and other questions in the next hour. So I enjoin everyone to give our distinguished guest speaker your most preferential attention. Thank you and good day.
Thank you very much, Governor Tony P. And now to the much awaited part of our program, our guest speaker. I'd like to call my fellow Rotarian from the Rotary Club of Pasig and also an Assistant Secretary of the Department of Justice to introduce our guest speaker. Let's welcome Rotarian Nikki T.
Thank you, Past President John. Good evening, fellow Rotarians. It is my honor to introduce tonight's guest speaker. Above all, she's my immediate boss in the Department of Justice, and she was instrumental to my working in the Department of Justice. Without her recommendation, I wouldn't be having the opportunity to serve our country today in the DOJ. So Emmeline Aglipay-Villar, or USEC M, as we fondly call her in DOJ, is currently the Undersecretary for Legal Services and Legislative Liaison Cluster of the DOJ, and is also Undersecretary in charge of the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, or the IACAT for short. She graduated magna cum laude in 2002 with a degree in AB Economics from De La Salle University. She earned her Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of the Philippines and was one of the top students of the class of 2006. She took up her Masters of Law at the London School of Economics and Political Science. In 2012, Yusek M was one of the youngest recipients of the Outstanding Young Men, or TOYM Award, for public service, for devoting her life to community development and for spearheading several successful sustainable livelihood programs of the Democratic Independent Workers Association, or DWAP, party list. Prior to being appointed as Undersecretary of the DOJ, she was a three-term Congresswoman of the DWAP party list, serving as a member of the House of Representatives from 2010 to 2018. Her advocacy for the protection of the rights of women, children, youth, workers, and other vulnerable groups is evident in the laws she has authored. Among them are the Domestic Workers Act, the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Act, the Expanded Maternity Leave Law, the first 1,000 Days Act, Persons with Disability Act, Value Added Tax Exemption Act, the Mental Health Act, the Act Strengthening Occupational Health and Safety Standards, and the Unified Student Financial Assistance System of Higher and Technical Education Act. As Undersecretary in charge of the Interagency Council Against Trafficking, he instituted notable policy reforms in the prosecution of trafficking in persons cases by moving towards a victims centered approach to prosecution of trafficking in persons cases that reduces the re traumatization to the victim and promotes restorative justice. Under her leadership, the regional and port anti trafficking task forces were activated and reorganized, which allowed for a more coordinated and stronger response against trafficking. Tremendous improvements in the collection and monitoring of data on trafficking in persons cases have been set in place, which are necessary for a calibrated and informed response against trafficking in persons. And finally, through her efforts, the IACAT now has a 1,500 square meter center that will serve as a shelter for victims of trafficking in persons, a one stop shop for the processing of incidences or complaints of human trafficking, and a center for skills training to provide victims with livelihood and facilitate their reintegration into society. She is a strong leader and a staunch advocate who has devoted her life to uplift the plight of the oppressed and vulnerable. So once again, please welcome Undersecretary Emmeline Aglipay-Villar.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Sec Nikki, for the generous introduction. And thank you to the Rotary Club of Pasig for inviting me tonight to be your speaker. I'd like to first greet the District Governor, Mr. Tony P. Parungao, and the President of Rotary Club of Pasig, RJ Ermita. Also, good evening to all the officers of the Rotary Club of Pasig, the members, and all our guests. Next slide, please. First of all, I'm very happy that you're interested in helping and knowing about the problem of online sexual exploitation of children, because not too many people know the extent and gravity of this problem in the Philippines. The Philippines has been tagged as the global epicenter of online sexual exploitation and abuse of children. Child sexual abuse images and online exploitation surged during this pandemic, and that's why it became a headline in the news, and a lot of people were interested about it. But actually, this problem has been growing and growing ever since the early 2000s, so in the last 2 decades. Next slide, please. First, let me tell you what the definition of OSEC is. Actually, there's no law right now defining what online sexual exploitation and abuse of children is. However, it is classified as a qualified trafficking in persons offense. And trafficking refers to the obtaining, hiring, providing, or offering of a minor, meaning below 18, abusing his or her vulnerable position with or without compensation for the purpose of sexual exploitation or sexual abuse, pornography, or prostitution. So when this happens and is published or transmitted online for a third party, then it becomes online sexual exploitation or abuse of children. Next slide. However, it's not only the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act where OSEC can be penalized under. It's also the Special Protection of Children Against Abuse, or RA 7610, the Anti-Exploitation and Discrimination Act, the Anti-Child Pornography Act, or RA 9775, and the Cybercrime Prevention Act. Next slide. Here from a study of the International Justice Mission, which shows global enforcement data global enforcement data is a collection of data from different foreign law enforcement agencies, such as the FBI, the UK National Crime Agency, the Australian Federal Police, the Nordic Police. So this data comes from the global law enforcement data. You can see here that there was a consistent rise in the number of IP addresses used for OSEC or linked to OSEC in the Philippines between 2014 and 2017. So from 2,326 IP addresses used to commit online sexual exploitation of children, it increased sharply to 4,872 in 2017. Later, I'll be showing to you more recent data, showing 2019 to 2020 data. Next slide, please. So the IP addresses linked to commercial sexual exploitation of children from December 2014 to December 2017 has increased from over 20,000 to over 80,000. Next, please. Like I said earlier, the Philippines has been tagged as the global hotspot of OSEC, and this is backed up by data. There were 237 referrals from law enforcement agencies in different countries, and the next one is Mexico, which is just 27. So this means that we have 8 times as many referrals of OSEC cases from other countries versus any other country in the world. So we are the largest supplier of child sexual exploitation material in the world. Next. The annual number of cases referred to or investigated by the Philippine anti-trafficking units increased sharply in since 2014 until just recently 2020 during the pandemic, where there was another spike, meaning the rate of increased further. Next slide. In the Philippines, the most cases actually that have been filed on OSEC are in NCR, and the highest is in Taguig. The other cities in NCR that have high incidence of OSEC are Manila and Quezon City. In Region 7 is the next, in Cebu City. Region 3, we have Pampanga and Bulacan. In Region 10, we have Bukidnon, Camiguin, Misamis Occidental, Misamis Oriental, Lanao del Norte, and Cagayan de Oro City. And Region 13 in Butuan and Surigao. Based on data from the Philippine Internet Crimes Against Children Center, or the PICAC is actually composed of the NBI, Anti-Human Trafficking Division, the PNP, Women and Children Protection Center, the UK National Crime Agency, the International Justice Mission, and the US Department of State Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking. So all these agencies, Philippine government agencies and international law enforcement agencies, and as well as international NGO, work together to be able to provide the services that the PICAC offers to the public, which is to conduct investigation and rescue of victims of online sexual exploitation of children. Here you can see that, sorry, can you go back, please? You can see that the operations and rescues increased in 2020 compared to 2019. Actually, 2020 was our highest, the year where we have one of the highest number of convictions and cases filed. It's just to show the public, show you that even though there is a pandemic, that the IACAT, the government, has intensified its efforts in order to combat this crime. Next, please. So it's just in graph form. You can see the number of rescue operations, the number of victims increased, and also more offenders were arrested. Next, please. Based on data from the Anti-Money Laundering Council, they also conducted their own study, and they found that the suspicious transactions reports that came from banks, money service businesses have increased during the time, during 2020, where there was a lockdown. And you can see here from 2019, wherein there were just 19,000 suspicious transactions. Sorry, I got lost. I got disconnected, but please let me continue. There is a list of known sex offenders that is shared among law enforcement agencies. So that's first. Another is if the sender is there are different senders coming from different countries, and these are the frequency of sending. There's no pattern, and it's sending to the recipient in the Philippines, does not have any relationship with senders, and usually the money service businesses who report these suspicious transactions are oriented by the AMLC to let them know what the badges are, what to watch out for, to tag transactions as suspicious and related to online sexual exploitation of children. Next, please. So STRs, or suspicious transactions reports related to child pornography, involved international inward remittance transactions from various countries, and it accounts for 52.24%, or a total of 1,364 of all the STRs filed, because there are also STRs related to terrorism, etc. Individuals residing in foreign countries send money to facilitators. I'll explain how OSEC actually happens in the Philippines, who are based here in the Philippines. And the facilitators send the child sexual exploitation material, pornographic material, images, videos, live streaming of children being abused sexually or exploited sexually. Based on the number of STRs, the country that has the most, from which the most STRs come from, is the Philippines, and it's the USA, and then next is the Philippines, Australia, Canada, and UK. So it doesn't mean that because that OSEC is always Next slide, please. So here, you can see that the Philippines is among the top 5 remitter countries, accounting to about 7.16% of total STRs filed, and majority of the remittance transactions involving the Philippines as the sender country, and at the same time, the beneficiary country, pertaining to inward or domestic remittances concerning OSEC. So here are the sender countries based on the amount. The highest is again the USA, Australia, the Philippines, Canada, and Kuwait. Next slide, please. Here you can see that the money service businesses accounts for 97% of the transmission of payment for OSEC. So it's usually done through money service businesses. And the rest, electronic money issuers, banks, and virtual currency exchanges are just the rest, the 3%. Next. So here are the top beneficiary locations based on the number of suspicious transactions. Cavite, Cebu, Caloocan, Pampanga, Cagayan de Oro, Bulacan, Rizal, Mandaluyong, Bukidnon, and Davao. And the top 10 beneficiary locations based on the amount. So based on the amount, it's Cagayan de Oro, Cavite, Cebu, Caloocan, Bulacan, Mandaluyong, Pampanga, Tarlac, Bukidnon, and Rizal. So this again is data coming from the Anti-Money Laundering Council. However, these are just suspicious transactions. So they have yet to be investigated, and these are not yet cases filed. Next slide. Based on the cyber tipline reports, the cyber tipline reports are reports coming from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children in the USA. So every time a child sexual exploitation material or content is viewed in the internet, anywhere in the world, but the source is the Philippines, it's one count. So if it's shared and viewed multiple times, it is again another count, even though it's the same material. So the cyber tipline reports increased drastically during the time of the pandemic. And although we should take this with a grain of salt, because this is not accurate in the sense that number one, it isn't an actual count, because one count is every time one photo or video is shared, viewed, it's one count. Another is this is determined through artificial intelligence. So innocent posts like parents sharing photos of their children showering or without a shirt in the pool, that this can be counted as child sexual exploitation material. So out of all the 1.3 million reports, only 9 were deemed by the Office of Cybercrime to be actionable, and only 4 were actually cases that have been filed. Next slide. As to customer information, the customers are usually male, and 34% of them come from the USA, 25% from Sweden, and 18% from Australia. And this is coming from the global law enforcement data. So you can see it's different from the suspicious transactions report, because that is based on reports from the money service businesses, the banks, whereas these are actual cases already referred to us by foreign law enforcement agencies. So the customer establishes contact with the facilitator or the trafficker here in the Philippines. And traffickers are usually female and Filipino. And they are usually from, the median age is 27 years old. Whereas the customer are male and the age is ranging from 40 to 72 years old. Next slide, please. The victims, on the other hand, 86% of them are female and 14% are male. However, if you compare this to establishment-based or street-based sexual exploitation of children, the physical sexual abuse, OSEC victims are much younger, and there are more males being exploited online than in physical abuse or sexual abuse or exploitation. The median age is 11 years old, but the youngest, actually, it says here 1 year old, but the youngest actually that we have rescued is just 25 days old. So a 25-day-old infant was rescued last February 2020 in San Pedro, Laguna, and he was sexually abused together with his 2 siblings and a cousin by their mother. So here are the ages, the range of ages. So most of those who are rescued are related to each other. So as you can see, it's a family-based crime because 40% are the facilitators are their own parents, and 41% are other relatives. So it means 81% are usually related to the victims. The abusers are usually parents or close of kin. And 56% of those rescued are related. Next slide, please. Now we ask ourselves why. Why is the Philippines the #1 source of child sexual exploitation material in the world? Why do they turn to us? A lot of factors contribute to this. First is that we communicate well in English, the fluency in English. It's really an enabling factor to the commission of OSEC, communication with the customer. Next is that we're always online. I mean, it increased more during the pandemic, but even prior to the pandemic, the Philippines is the #1 country with the most number of hours spent online and most number of hours spent on social media. So it's either just Thailand or us. Every year we're just exchanging places. So this means that they have we are easily accessible to sexual predators online. And next, please, next slide. And of course, the last factor that I failed to mention earlier is that we are living in poverty. So there's a need, and that's probably one of the factors that push the facilitators to abuse their own children and commit the crime. How do law enforcement agents track those who commit online sexual exploitation of children? We do online surveillance and monitoring. Although we don't have the most advanced technology in the Philippines to be able to really comb the internet and prevent these transactions from happening. Most of the time, we are passive in the sense that we are able to obtain evidence from foreign law enforcement agencies, pieces of evidence that help us to narrow down our online surveillance. We also conduct physical surveillance and monitoring. We do undercover work. Most of our undercover work, we are helped by foreign law enforcement agents, foreigners who pose as customers. And that's how we are able to entrap the facilitators. We get reports from the victims or other victims, reports or tips from witnesses, reports from other suspects or perpetrators when they're already captured, reports or tips from other law enforcement agents, and of course, those coming from the money service businesses and banks. Next slide, please. We respond to the problem by focusing on prevention, prosecution, protection, partnership, and policy. These are what we call the 5 Ps. Next slide. In terms of prevention, we've already conducted a lot of media campaigns related to OSEC. During the pandemic, as I said earlier, the situation worsened because the need increased. A lot of people lost their jobs. A lot of people, of course, not only here in the Philippines, but also abroad, were forced to be locked down in their homes and thus spend more time online and have more time to conduct these activities. Since there's a lockdown, the abusers are locked down 24/7 with the children that they abuse. So they're able to produce more content and abuse the children round the clock, and of course, on the demand side, since the sexual predators are also locked down, their demand also increased during the pandemic. To prevent this, to prevent the crime of OSEC, we also have our 1343 action line. which we promote online also. We promote through, prior to the pandemic, we've been promoting it in LRT stations. We've been promoting this. We go to the barangays and educate the barangay kagawads, barangay captains, as to what the badges of online sexual exploitation of children are. We ask for the help of the barangay kagawads and barangay captains to watch out for these signs so that they know if someone is being abused in the home, in their home, and then we can conduct surveillance. So the barangays have been very instrumental also in helping us capture and rescue also victims, capture perpetrators and rescue victims. So we've also involved the different agencies, the DepEd, the DILG, like I mentioned, the DICT, and we've all been working together with this, together with the NGOs. So we train also our prosecutors through the Prosecuting Online Sexual Exploitation of Children on how to properly prosecute online sexual exploitation of children. Next slide. In terms of prosecution, the number of convictions, like I mentioned earlier, this 2020 has really increased. So here you can see every year our number of convictions increase, and we have a 92% conviction rate. Most of the time, the victims do not want to testify because it's very hard for them to testify against their own parents and or their close of kin. So we really have to, the prosecutors have to be trained to proceed with a trial without a victim witness. And that means that we have to rely on other evidence available to us other than the testimony of the witness. Next slide. Protection. So we've established the PICAC, like I mentioned earlier, the NBI Anti-Human Trafficking Division, the PNP Women and Children Protection Center. The OPSEN is the Operations Center. The OPSEN is composed of intelligence agents who actually assist the victims, assist in the rescue. We also have victim witness coordinators that are assigned to every victim witness, to take care of them. The victim witnesses go through a very traumatizing, situation, being abused and exploited, and going through a trial is another source of trauma for them. So as we all know, a trial can take years, 2 to 3 years, and sometimes even more when it's appealed. So this is a source of trauma for them, and as much as possible, we want to reduce that by, number one, going through plea bargaining. So a lot of our convictions were achieved through plea bargaining. If you go back to the last slide, please. No, the slide before. It says that 51% of OSEC convictions are achieved through plea bargaining. So half, a little more than half, are achieved through plea bargaining. Next slide. And the reason why this is so is because through plea bargaining, we are able to reduce the time of trial and achieve a conviction right away. Of course, without sacrificing the rights of the accused. And as always, having the best interest of the child as the priority. We also have the video in-depth interview kit. So the VD kit, as we call it, makes it possible for the victim witness to be interviewed just once during the investigation. So when the victim is rescued, we prepare the VD kit, and a trained law enforcement officer will conduct the interview, and the interview will be videotaped, and this will be the recording that will be used for the trial, so that the victim witness, the child victim witness, does not need to testify over and over again. This is under the rules of the examination of a child witness. And like I mentioned earlier, we have a victim witness coordinator. Next slide. We also established partnerships with foreign law enforcement agencies, and that's why I mentioned earlier, they help us through the PICAC. We have intensified our coordination with the AMLC, with the DICT, and also international organizations. Since this is a transnational crime, it really requires also a transnational approach to solving it. Next slide. And lastly, policy. So we have given our set of suggestions to the legislators on what in particular needs to be amended under our current laws in order for us to be able to combat the crime of OSEC. One of the recommendations that we made is to make OSEC an exemption to the anti-wiretapping law. So we are not able to conduct surveillance, of course, through a court order. So the amendment that we wish to propose under RA 9208 or the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Act has safeguards so that individual rights won't be sacrificed by that exemption to the anti-wiretapping law. So aside from that, there is the 9775, RA 9775, or the Anti-Child Pornography Act, which mandates that internet service providers should supply the NBI or the PNP within 7 days upon their knowledge that their server is being used for child pornography. They should inform the NBI or the PNP of this fact, and they should be able to preserve the evidence for purposes of investigation. They should be able to install filtering devices, filtering systems that would enable them to do this. However, they're not able to install this technology, so they're not able to comply with this requirement. Just recently, we recommended to the President that the NTC, the National Telecommunications Commission, would impose sanctions on the ISPs in accordance with the RA 9775 so that they would be able to fulfill the requirements under the law, and this would greatly aid law enforcement officers in identifying the perpetrators and capturing them. So the AMLC also recommended to lower or remove the threshold for remittances that the covered persons, such as the banks and the money service businesses, would be required to report. And the Office of Cybercrime and the NBI Anti-Human Trafficking Division suggested prescribing standards for ISPs. Actually, there are already standards for ISPs. There are memorandum circulars issued by the NTC in relation to the responsibilities of the internet service providers. However, these are not implemented. So a number of reasons contribute to this, which are very technical. So I will not be discussing them anymore tonight. Next slide. What can the private sector do? So first is to help us increase awareness about the problem. Some of the rescues that not some, but quite a lot of the rescues that we've conducted are based on tips from neighbors, classmates, teachers, and concerned citizens that a child is being abused sexually. So, and they're able to do this because they are educated about it. But the vast majority of Filipinos are not. And we need your help in increasing awareness regarding this problem. Even the own facilitators, the parents of the children, do not know that this is a crime. When we get them, they say that it isn't a crime because there's no physical contact, it's just a photo, there's no touching, so they think it's not wrong. So people should be educated about this. And next is, you can also, if you have a company, you can strengthen your company policy measures with respect to anti-trafficking in person. So not necessarily just OSEC, but trafficking involves a lot of other acts. It's not only online sexual exploitation. It can include, trafficking. The main element here is exploitation. So if usually illegal recruitment has an element of exploitation, so it can fall under RA 9208, it can fall under illegal recruitment. So just strengthen your policies, company policies, so as to avoid exploitation of workers, avoid exploitation of people. So for instance, in the DOJ, we are coming up with something that would that would prevent exploitation of workers in terms of the companies that are able to participate in bidding, etc. Next is to provide help for the trafficking in persons shelter or the tahanan ng iyong pag-asa shelter. Right now, it's not fully operational because we don't have furniture, appliances, and other necessities in the trafficking in persons shelter. The funds that we have allotted for it were actually repurposed, not repurposed, but reallocated for COVID response. But this coming year we'll be able to allot funds for it. But we need your help if you can extend help to the shelter. And lastly, of course, if you know anything, please report it to the 1343 action line. Next slide. So that ends my presentation, and I would be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Villar. To help me, to assist me in the Q&A portion, I'd like to let's welcome Charter President Bobby Rosadia to assist me. You may type your questions in the chat box to facilitate the Q&A. Kindly indicate whether you would like the host or the MCs to ask the questions, or you would like to do it yourselves. But I believe our governor has some questions. When he started during his speech alone, he had 5 questions. So perhaps we can start with Governor Tony P. to start the Q&A. Gov?
Yes. Am I? Yeah, I'm not muted. All right, I thought I was. Well, first of all, I just quite like to know what the protective measures are being implemented by the prosecutors of the DOJ for OSEC survivors. Exactly what is being done, because I find it disturbing that a survivor who has undergone such an experience would have to go through the process of being paraded in a video conferencing proceeding. What's your take on that, OSEC?
Actually, if you talk to the survivors, they prefer the video conference proceeding rather than having to physically physically go to the prosecutor's office or to physically attend trial. It's these victims do not have the funds to commute every time there is a trial. Sometimes the venue is far from where they live, so it's really a burden to them to have to travel. And the video conferencing, even the NGOs, the child rights protection NGOs like the IJM, the International Justice Mission, prefer this for the children because it reduces the burden to them. They don't, but usually if they need to attend trial, our victim witness coordinators assist them, pick them up at their house, spend for their, if we can, we spend for their travel expense. But even though they prefer to have the video conferencing. So for the child witnesses, for the NGOs, they prefer this. So, and I see the point why, because it reduces the burden to them, having to physically go to the location, spend a day there. Sometimes they have to sleep over another place, and because the venue is too far from where they live, so they have to spend for their accommodations, their overnight accommodations. So it's very burdensome. And that's why also there have been more convictions at this time, because usually there are postponements if they have to physically attend and they're not able to. Whereas if it's video conferencing, less postponements because they can attend because it's just through video.
The assistance extended by the DOJ applies only to litigation. Does it also apply to proceedings at the inquest or preliminary investigation stage? USEC?
Yes,
Okay.
our victim witness coordinators assist even if it's just in the prosecution stage.
Thank you.
CP Bobby, I think we have questions.
Yeah, I think we have a question from TPRJ.
Oh yeah, thank you
Go
very
ahead.
much. Yeah, Villar, thank you very much for that. It's a lot. It's very bothersome, but very informative. I'm curious. In the earlier slides, you showed areas of concentrated, in a sense, where transactions happen.
Yes.
And at first, I thought they were referring to areas with high poverty, but you talk about Taguig, Mandaluyong, Davao, etc. So, why is it so? My theory is that where a lot of foreigners also sort of have access to or are familiar with. What's your take on it?
Well, these are areas also with high connectivity. So it's one of the factors that contribute to why there are more incidences there. But it's not an absolute factor, because in Cordova, Cebu, it became one of the hotspots of OSEC, and it's far from the city. Far from Cebu City.
Yeah.
But that's one reason. In Taguig, it's as a city, it has a high it has a high income, but there are two sides of the gig. There's also the urban poor side. So most of the victims come from that side.
Thank you.
Okay, we have another question from Dokata from RC Pasig, I believe.
Yes, magandang gabi po. Thank you, USEC Villar, for this enormous presentation. I'm very much involved kasi sa community pediatrics. I involve myself in communities, their dynamics and interactions. And one of the things that you highlighted is poverty, to be reasons for them involving in this kind of criminality. Ang tanong ko lang po, Yusek, pagdating po ba sa level ng barangay, because these things happen at home, sa bahay, ano po ang extent ng magiging power ng barangay? Because we had examples and situations sa community where I came from, yung mga adopted communities namin, na ang sinasabi ng barangay, ayusin niyo po muna ang family ninyo dahil ayaw ng skandal at ayaw din ng barangay na mag-handle ng ganito. Kaya yun po ang aking magiging tanong. Paano po ang magiging power ng barangay kung ganito ang sinasagot ng mga women's desk at child's desk sa barangay level pa lang? Yusek?
I don't deny that there are law enforcement agents who still subscribe to the idea that since it's a domestic problem, the family and the family should take care of solving it, like what you said. A domestic
Opo.
problem, a domestic issue, therefore it should be settled domestically, and the
Opo.
government should not intrude in domestic matters. But we have been, together with the DSWD, educating the barangays about this, bringing down the policy to the barangays, to the communities, and educating them about it, that this is not a domestic matter. Sure, it's happening within the home, but this is a crime against persons. And even if it occurs within the home, the government should, because it is its duty, step in and arrest the problem, meaning prevent the problem from going further, rescue the victim, and prosecute the offenders.
Yes, Yusek, if I may, follow-up question lang po, kung pwede po. Meron po bang pwedeng check and balance or safeguarding in the event na barangay doesn't want to handle such cases at ire-refer ka sa City Hall, which is mas madalas, mas malayo doon po sa lugar kung saan ito nangyari. So, dumadami yung oras, nawawala yung relevance because time is of the essence, nawawala yung justice para po dun sa victim. Meron po bang gano'n na capability?
Well, you know, there are a lot of avenues for reports to be on OSEC to be coursed through. It doesn't mean that definitely, it's not the barangay alone that can step in. Although I'm not saying that what they did is right, what they did is wrong. But in case it happens to anyone that they're reporting to a barangay an OSEC case and the barangay does not want to entertain them, they can call 1343 and report it. And the 1343 action line directly refers it to the IACAT, and at once we are able to usually we send the PNP WCPC to conduct the rescue.
Thank you for that, Yusek Villar. Thank you. 1343.
1343.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Congratulations po.
So I think that also already answers the question of HP, who's asking the number of TIP. Yusek Villar, if I may ask myself a question, no? I noticed earlier you said 51% of the cases go through plea bargaining. So, what normally, if there's plea bargaining, what cases are they convicted for, and what is the penalty that that's actually received by the perpetrators?
Okay, so usually, of course, the plea bargain, they're convicted for a lesser offense.
Yes.
Usually, so which is necessarily included in the offense that was charged. So, for instance, if they're charged with qualified trafficking in persons, which is, like I said earlier, if it's OSEC, it's qualified trafficking in persons. But there is something with a lesser penalty, like because qualified trafficking in persons the penalty is life imprisonment. But there is under 9775, which is child pornography. The penalty is reclusion temporal. So it's a lower penalty, but it's included within. The acts under child pornography are included within the acts constituting section the Qualified Trafficking in Persons Act, Section 4A in relation to Section 6 of RA 9208. Sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you, Yusek.
Yeah, we have a question. I'm being asked to ask a question. Is it really true that, as you mentioned, ma'am, in the presentation, that there were as young as month-old babies that were exploited for this?
Baby. Yeah, 25-day-old baby is the youngest. So it's
okay, and
yes, unfortunately, yes, it's a fact.
Okay. And I guess a follow-up question would be, because of the pandemic, you said that there was an increase in the number of cases. Well, that was prior to pandemic, right? 2020, but it went down, I think, something December. Is there any correlation between the number of online offenders as to the nature of their offense, being online, doing this online, and of actual physical offenders too? I
Any
mean, is there
relation?
is the profile,
The
is the
same.
profile of an online offender mixed with a profile of being a physical offender too in some
Yes,
cases?
yes, yes. Because if you notice, one of the hotspots, OSEC hotspots, is Pampanga, Region 3 Pampanga. And that is also the highest, the hotspot for physical or street-based, establishment-based sexual exploitation of
Mm.
children. Um, so usually they can establish contact online first, and then go here and meet the facilitator, meet the children being abused online, or the other way around. They're able to meet the children here first, and then uh, continue with the exploitation online if they have to return to their home country. But of course,
Okay, thank you very much.
not all cases of OSEC have a physical exploitation element, in terms of the customer exploiting the children.
Hmm. Is that rather the exception rather than the rule then?
Uh, I wouldn't say, because there's still, I don't have the actual percentage, but I wouldn't also classify it as an exception. It's more than an exception. It's because there are a number of cases.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much. You have another question from PE Angel Lazar.
Hello. Good evening, and thank you for sharing with us, USEC, all these data. In one of your previous slides, I noticed that you showed there the number of arrests. The number of raids went up by about 4 times, from four two to eight, I think. Then the number of rescued increased also fourfold, but the number of arrests went down from
I
39 to
agree.
35. So why is it so? We went there 4 times more, saved 4 times more, but those who were arrested went down.
If you can show the slide, please, Nadine. Well, I can explain it, because sometimes the slide actually shows victims rescued. Victims rescued.
Okay.
So sometimes there are there are a lot of victims rescued all at once in one house, in one location. But the reason why the arrest went down, because it's not right away that we're able to make the arrest. So we're able to rescue the victims, but we still need to conduct further investigation to be able to make the arrest sometimes. Are you talking? No, I think he's talking about the graph where there's the line graph. No.
I think it's a side by side graph.
Yeah. 29, 2019, 2020. Well,
No.
anyway, so that's the reason.
This is
Yeah,
the
we're not
one.
able to conduct the arrest right away.
Yeah.
Uh, because of course we have to do case build up first. The complaints need to be filed. The warrant of arrest needs to be secured.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yusek, there's another question. I'm asked to read it. Uh, the question is, often the perpetrators of the abuse are the trusted adults of the children, right? So it makes it really difficult for outsiders like the teacher to intervene. Sometimes they get sued by the parents if they act on disclosures by victims. So how do we protect those who bring these abuses to light? That's the question.
Well, it's true. You know, we have some cases where there are retaliatory prosecutions filed against those who are involved in reporting, or even the victims themselves, like perjury, uh, and other counter cases filed, not related to OSEC. And well, we also assist them actually. The IACAT also assists them, although it's not our job to, but we assist them. As to prevention, how can you prevent this? Uh, Really, you know, it's up to it's their right to file a case also, and it's really going to be the job of the prosecutor who will evaluate. It's their right to file a complaint, but the prosecutors who will evaluate the evidence before them, it's their duty to be judicious about it and examine the evidence before them if it's really a proper case, if there is indeed probable cause. More often than not, because it's a retaliatory course of action by the offenders, it would be obvious on its face that it's just a harassment suit, and it will be dismissed.
Okay, I do. Are there any more questions? But one more question, Yusek Villar, if you don't mind. Is there anything? Of course, you mentioned that of course you need the help of the private sector now. But for example, for our Rotary clubs, is there anything you would like us to do in order to help fight this? Any suggestions on what we can do uh, to help combat uh, this problem?
Well, the first one, like what I said earlier, is really to raise awareness. And the second is to take care of our victims. We're having a hard time taking care of them. It's not the job of the DOJ, it's more of the DSWD's job. But it's still under IACAT, and so it's still under me. Um, we're having a hard time taking care of them because we lack social workers who are trained to handle this particular case, OSEC. Uh, we lack, because what we want to happen with the children is to get them back on track. Of course, they had to stop studying. Of course, they will, if their parents are prosecuted, they will lose their parents. It's really, you can just imagine what they're going through. They were abused by their own parents. Uh, who they trust, love. They have to be separated from their parents. When the case is filed against their parents, their parents will go to jail. So they will lose their parents for life because the imprisonment is for life. They will lose their own parents. Some of them don't have any close of kin. So we have to find a family for them, a foster family who will take care of them. And that's hard. Finding and matching a child victim to a foster family is hard. When I was growing up, we acted as a foster family for a boy who was also a victim of abuse. And it was hard. I didn't understand it. I was still 6, 7. I didn't understand what was happening, why we had a boy in our home. And it didn't quite work out. Eventually, it didn't quite work out, and he had to be moved out. I'm just saying this because sometimes the intentions are there, but it just doesn't work out. Like our family, we really wanted to act as a foster family for victims, child victims of abuse, but just so that you know that these options are also open to you if you want to be a foster family, or if you know someone who wants to be a foster family. um, but that's one, knowing, increasing awareness about it, knowing the problem. uh, Second is, like I said, to help in the tip center, that's another one. Or do you want are you more interested in finding perpetrators, helping in finding the perpetrators? Because if that's the case, it's really going to be a technology issue. Um, and it's going to be concerning the ISPs, which is more of a technical matter that the DICT would probably be more competent to discuss than the DOJ.
Mm. Yusek, a question. Do you have? So I think it's also vital that we are able to train people who work with kids to at least be conscious or be aware or to identify telltale signs of abuse. I know your department is doing this or your committee is doing this, but do you have if you ever were interested in pushing this forward by because we have adopted schools too. Most of the clubs have adopted schools that we work with. Do you have, aside from yourself, a partner or organizations that work with you that we can also tap in case we want to improve the awareness at the community level for these things?
Yes, we do. So we have the Child Rights Network, and we have the IJM, the International Justice Mission. We have UNICEF. We work with UNICEF. UNICEF has a space, child friendly. They have a space in our Trafficking in Person Center where they conduct their, I guess, their therapy for the children. So these are some of the organizations that we work with, local and foreign.
You said there's a question
There's
here.
also another question related to that. Do you have a social media account or some materials online that can be accessed by other people if they want to like share it online or spread it?
Yes, we have a Facebook account and we also have a website. So our Facebook account is IACAT, IACAT, and we have several content there explaining what OSEC is and other forms of trafficking actually, not just OSEC. And we have a website, IACAT, IACAT, .gov.ph.
You said there's another
Thank you.
question
John?
here. Yeah. It says here the question is, are LGUs, especially in the NCR, required to adopt ordinances to combat this menace? Or is it contingent on the rate of incidents of OSE?
Well, it's not. It's not dependent on the rate of commission of OSEC. We go to different barangays and we talk to different municipalities, giving them a draft ordinance that they can also pass in their respective jurisdiction. And some of them already have, some of them are still discussing it. And uh, we encourage them as much as possible to issue their own ordinances.
Okay, thank you, Yusek. I don't see. Are there any more questions? It seems that. Oh, there's another question from again from PE Angel Guzari from the Rotary Club of Pasig West. Angel.
Thank you again. Yusek, you mentioned kasi you were a foster family for a survivor and it didn't work out quite well. My question is, okay, we are coaching, we are helping the victims for them to be able to go back to society, and there are foster families who will help them out. Do you coach or are there also means to get these families ready in accepting the survivors? Because I'm sure it will be a very different well experience for these families. Do they have the skills? Do they have the tools for them to understand how to handle and how to bring in a survivor and bring them back to society?
Yes. So both the government and NGOs help the family and provide guidance and education to the family who will act as foster family. It's just that when we were a foster family, I couldn't remember. I was too young probably.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. So it seems there are no more questions. CP Bobby, no, I don't say no more
Yep.
questions. So thank you very much, Yusek and Villar, for the
Very
very
much.
informative talk. Before we end this evening's webinar, this evening's webinar rather, I'd like to call again our District Governor Tony P. Parunao.
Thank you very much, John. And by virtue of the duties and responsibilities entrusted to me by Rotary International, I now adjourn this very relevant and very informative webinar. Thank you all, and good evening.
Thank
Thank you
you.
again, Yusek.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yusek.
Thank you, and
Thank you very much, Yusek. Thank you.
thank you all on behalf of the Rotary Club of Pasig. Thank you everyone for attending. Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations, John and RC Pasig. Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thanks everyone.
So can someone please explain to me why you consider the title, the position of John as very appropriate, given his
RJ, may tanong.
I'll call
My
you.
question in the
I'll
Rotary
send you a
Q&A.
private
question.
message, Governor.
In order to be there, for there to be peace, there has to be conflict. In order for you to resolve conflict, there has to,
You have to be used.
there has to be conflict, no? Maybe that's it, no? For there to be.
No, actually, I thought that you were, very diplomatic, that you were peace-loving, and that you are well-connected. That's why, we got Yusek Aglipay-Villar here.
Now, again, of course, we'd like to thank ASEC, Rotary Nikki T,
Yeah,
who's
Thank you very much.
my sponsor in the club, ha?
My eldest
Yeah.
daughter, who just joined Rotary, passed by and then said, "Uy, si Pro." Nung nakita si Nikki.
Oh.
Galing eh.
Si Paula,
Basta,
sir.
Gov, I
Yeah,
actually
that's
thought that
Paula.
the month was just peace and conflict. Peace and conflict month. Akala ko conflict month lang eh. Na-clarify na may resolution.
The conflict. Iba-iba kasi may promoting peace, may peace. No, really, that title of that area of focus keeps on changing. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Di ba?
Yeah. There's a
So sometimes it's
modification
just
every year.
peace and conflict prevention. Now it's peace and conflict prevention and resolution. At it is same anyway.
But regardless,
Siguro naman, alam naman yung sagot dun sa tanong niya.
Peace building and conflict prevention.
gusto ko lang malaman paano yung reaction.
Prevention.
Kayo naman, no?
Hindi mo na kami kailangan tanongin ko ko na
At saka
sagot sa tanong ko.
salamat po sa head ng areas of focus, CP Bobby Residia, for, of course, the all-out support.
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Problem, wala akong ginawa dyan. Ikaw yan eh.
Tayong lahat yan.
Dyan, walang lapis, walang kulang. Quota ka na.
Puta na. Pwede na.
The grade
Pwede
pa lang
na.
to sa'yo eh.
Oo nga eh. Actually, sabi ko kay Doc, baka pagalitan mo ako pag wala akong project ngayong buwan eh. So,
Kakantsawan sana kita eh.
but you
John,
guys,
go muna na.
there's a Zone 6 meeting which is open to everyone. We will have Justice Carpio as our speaker. We're just finalizing the schedule.
Pero
So,
tuloy ba yung
hopefully-
kay, tuloy yung kay Chancey Fidel?
Yeah, Chancellor Nemenso will be our speaker.
Good.
For those interested, he will be the speaker of the Rotary Club of Pasig on Thursday. He will be talking about academic freedom and the UPDND Accord. So those who are interested, you may join the Rotary Club of Pasig
Usapang
meeting
basketball
on
yan,
Thursday at
Walang
1 o'clock.
UAAP, ah.
Wala, ano lang yan. Academic
Okay.
freedom and the UPDND
Thank you.
Accord. Yeah.
Test the guy from NU.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
John,
thank you.
Arch
And
Pasig.
Thank you very much,
everybody
everyone.
for attending. Congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Thank you, Garrick.
I think we can end this now.
everyone.
Okay, good night, everyone. I'm ending
Bye,
this
everyone.
now.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Congrats, RJ.